Jacksonville. The child was born but couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. The poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. With Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, the week that was, on the 14th of July 2018. A little bit of shameless promotion, as our old partner Jerry Pippin would say. You can get us on the iHeart Radio app, the Stitcher app, the Speaker app, on Google Play and Android. We should be there. And we'll come to Spotify eventually here. We'll appear there. And many, many more outlets tune in, just to name a few of the outlets that we are on. And they all have apps where you can tune in to us, if you pardon the pun. Nonetheless, last week was heroic week, I guess you'd say. DJ Trump was in London. He went to NATO. He managed to insult everyone there. And then he left for London. He visited the Prime Minister, who is under fire in the UK in a very tenuous position. They also gave him an England shirt. Of course, England had been eliminated from the World Cup. We'll have information on that later in the broadcast when we do the sports. And then he had the audacity to go to Buckingham Palace and jump in front of the Queen. So he continues to make news in the negative. Now he's holed up in Scotland, the birthplace of his mother, and he has a golf course there called, I believe, Tyndallberry or something like that. There in Scotland. He'll be there the rest of the weekend, and then he's off to Helsinki and a summit with the leader of the Russian Federation, V.I. Putin. So that wraps his week up. We'll go to the Sun newspaper now, just as a matter of historic record, as to what DJ Trump had to say there about the Prime Minister May. And somewhere here we'll find him. I believe this is it. The headline here in the Sun is Trump's Brexit blast. DJ Trump told Theresa May how to do Brexit, but she wrecked it and said the U.S. trade deal is off. And we'll hear that audio. They actually recorded him, so he can't, as they say, back out of it. Period. So let's get it first, and then we'll Oh, wait a minute, this is not it. One of the things about doing live radio, we'll have to...
I would have done it much differently. I actually told Theresa May how to do it, but she didn't agree with it. She didn't listen to me.
What did she say?
She didn't listen. No, I told her how to do it. That will be up to her to say. But I told her how to do it. She wanted to go a different route.
So you would be prepared to walk away if they didn't give you the right terms?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's going on is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's too long. Deals that take too long are never good ones.
What did you mean by the UK
When a
being
deal
too long?
takes so long, it's somehow, they never work out very well. I did give Theresa, who I like, I did give her my views on what she should do and how she should negotiate. And she didn't follow those views. I would actually say she probably went the opposite way. If you really look, she probably went the opposite way. And that's fine, she should negotiate the best way she knows how. But it's too bad what's going on.
That is DJ Trump on Theresa May and what he thought of Theresa May, and evidently was not very much that he thought of her. I had a longer portion here of the exchange, and this is not what we want. This is from The Sun. The Sun is a tabloid newspaper in the UK, and that was about a minute cut there. And this is a trade deal here. Now, this is very, very short.
Well, I think the deal that she's striking is not what the people voted on. It's a much different deal than the people voted on. It was not the deal that was in the referendum. I've just been hearing this over the last 3 days. I guess you've been just hearing about it over the last 3 days. I know they have a lot of resignations, so a lot of people don't like it. No, but it'll definitely affect trade with the United States, unfortunately in a negative way.
So basically, old Trump decided, and this is listen to the tapes here on trade, and this is, no, we don't want this one. There was a longer, when I read this article the first time around.
Well, if they do a deal like that, it will most likely, because we'll be dealing with the European Union instead of dealing with the UK. So it will probably kill the deal with, if they do that, their trade deal with the U.S. will probably not be made.
What did you mean by
because we have enough difficulty with the European Union. We're cracking down right now on the European Union because they have not treated the United States fairly on trade. No, if they do that, I would say that would probably end a major trade relationship with the United States.
So that is DJ Trump's opinion here, and let's hear one on Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was the foreign minister. He resigned, a leading former mayor of London, a leading candidate, leading proponent of Brexit.
Let me tell you, he's a very talented guy. I was very saddened to see that he was leaving government, and I hope he goes back in at some point, because I think he's a great representative for your country. I was very surprised and saddened that he was getting out of government. And you lost some other very good people. Well, I'm not pitting one against the other. I'm just saying I think he'd be a great prime minister. Yeah, I think he's got what it takes, and I think he's got the right attitude to be a great prime minister.
That was pieces of the interview that DJ Trump gave to the Sun newspaper, and you can basically see there he's endorsing Boris Johnson over May, who is in battle, to say the least, there in the UK. And he's not only threw Theresa May onto the bus, but he drove off there and put Boris Johnson on the bus. Now, Boris Johnson, where he is in various tenuous situation there, and the whole Tory party, and that's something that has to be mentioned here as to where that whole situation was going. I can recall when the Brexit campaign, the Leave people, the Leave people that supported the Leave the EU, we opposed that, and it was a very, very close election. Now, that was an election also that the Cambridge Analytica was involved in, as in the U.S. election. And basically the people that voted to leave the UK, a lot of pensioners in the north of England. So it became a very, very contentious situation. And the right-winger, Fergal, whatever his name was there, he came and campaigned for DJ Trump in the U.S., and as basis of that right-wing coalition and the right-wing government. If you recall, the conservatives in the UK have had various problems. They've had what they call hung parliaments, etc. We, of course, cover those elections in the UK, where our competition is the BBC, basically there. And we've been fortunate in our prediction on British elections and the outcome of British elections. Now, the pollsters in the UK had predicted that the forces to stay in the EU would win the election. Now, some said the Leave people would win, and it was basically, it's also a very, very close election. But in the end, they ended up with Brexit. And the problem with Brexit, and we've talked about this on Numbers Man, that's our financial program, macroeconomic program, about the problems of the UK being a very tenuous economy from the beginning. Now the EU, whatever program May comes up with, the EU has to approve the program, and by 2019 they have to get this done. And as Trump said, the way the negotiations are going, the trade deal that they wanted to make with the UK is no doubt dead. So that is where DJ Trump is. Several of the Democrats have urged DJ Trump to call off his summit with VI Putin. That was not going to happen. In the indictment of people in the Russian Federation for interference in the 2016 election, hacking into basic Democratic Party accounts, and supposedly delivered the information to WikiLeaks, Lucifer 2, and various other front types. They indicted some people from the Russian security agencies, which obviously is a waste of time. But this investigation, where does it go from here? Roger Stone was in it up to his ankles, no doubt. And the investigation of Robert Mueller goes on. So it kind of clouds up the whole situation there. DJ Trump's insisting he wants better relationship with the Russian Federation. So that summit goes on. It's the FBI indictments didn't have the impact it should have had. I wouldn't say it was a one-day story, but played up in the Washington Post and various other newspapers. But the question is, are people really paying attention? What they are paying attention to is health care. Bernie Sanders was in Minnesota on Friday campaigning for Keith Ellison, who's running for Attorney General there in Minnesota. And he was talking about health care, and for Bernie, it's Medicare for all. A very simple way of reaching it. As most people know, Medicare is the program, healthcare program for seniors. It's not comprehensive, but it does cover certain hospitalization, and A and B cover various procedures in the hospital, outpatient procedures, I should say. So, in other words, for perhaps 1 to 1.5 or perhaps 2% added to your FICA, it'll be less than that. What happens with all of these programs is on the front end, they cost more, because what you're doing is you're doing preventive health. The same thing with Obamacare, but the difference here, the federal government would be the insurer, and it would be paid basically from payroll deductions, I should say, and those that are not employed but are underemployed, etc., but now get a Medicaid, it would be folded in there. So those things would continue on, and hopefully they would have a provision in there to, as the VA does, is buy many of these drugs in mass. So that would lower drug care. Now, as far as people that did not want this, they could continue with private insurers. That would not be a problem at all. But it would affect private insurers in that the government programs like Medicare and Medicaid do now. The problem is that those programs are subcontracted out. A lot of Medicare to the United Healthcares of the world, the Humanas, etc., in certain regions of the country, are the ones that deal with Part D of the program. That is the prescription drug program. And they want to, with Medicare, contract more of those services out to these managed healthcare types. Now, that was a part of the program that Hillary the Monster Clinton introduced in the 90s and in the 90s primarily, while Bill Clinton was elected president. We always opposed that, having these private insurance companies in, and states rely upon them also. That just adds costs, and at the same time it curtails needed medical types of procedures, because what happens is they try to find the cheapest way they can and saving costs, and they're paid on top of that. If you just have a federal agency, you don't need to worry about that. Let me move on here. And the McDonald's salad, well, McDonald's has pulled salads, parasites there in the salads, 3,000 locations. These salads have become contentious. This is by Del Monte in June. Fruits, vegetables were called packaging there that had been in various places, and it caused people to become ill. And states affected, well, in many in the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Commonwealth Kentucky, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Ohio, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. So these things, they cause what is called cyclospora illness, and it can cause diarrhea, etc. It's normally not life-threatening, but it just shows that. And what had happened here was a pipe dripping that allowed fecal matter to get on the lettuce. So for those that eat salads or what have you, one has to watch out on prepared vegetable products, salads, etc. The washing that is there, and many times when they're affected like that, actually washing will not do. Let's see if we let's check our time here. We have time to actually. No, we're okay. The Trump administration has a new argument for dismantling the social safety net. It works. This is a very interesting article from the Washington Post by Jeff Stein and Tracy Jan, I think. Anyway, Republicans for years have proclaimed that the federal government's decades-old war on poverty, that was on the LBJ, a failure. Americans are no better off today than they were before the war on poverty in 1964. That was according to Paulie Ryan, who is resigning, and he presented his own plan to dramatically scale back the safety net. Now the Trump administration is pitching a new message on the anti-poverty program, saying effects that the Republicans had long condemned as ineffective already worked. According to the White House report this week, it declared that the war on poverty largely over and a success, arguing that few Americans are truly poor, only 3% of the population, and that the booming economy is the best path towards those who remain in path upward for those who remain in poverty. Over 51 years ago, since Lyndon B. Johnson declared a war on poverty, federal spending on what they call welfare programs targeting low-income households has grown dramatically, contributing to a substantial reduction in material hardships. The White House Council of Economic Advisors wrote, saying that poverty has fallen 90% since the program began. None of these statistics intended to deny the way in which millions of Americans sometimes struggle to make ends meet. The advisors wrote, the vast majority of Americans are able to meet their basic human needs. The report is the latest in a string of Trump administration's efforts to argue that poverty is a diminishing problem in the U.S. Healy tried to argue the same thing at the UN. Denouncing a UN report that said that 18.5 million Americans suffer extreme impoverishment. We argue over the dollars figure and whether people have to work or not to work. We never argue over the fact we have a problem. That is from Jane Candlewood, who served as the chief of staff to Olympia Snowe. She was from Maine when the Maine Republican was in Congress. And let me finish this up here. And maybe we'll append to the report. And poverty advocates, cite the lack of health care insurance for 25 million Americans. And we just talked about as evidence that far more people suffer from material deprivation. They also pointed to a study by Princeton University's economist there, Angus Dearton, found that 5.3 million Americans live on less than $1 a day, including government assistance. And the debate over the scope of American poverty, the White House and Republicans have begun early stages of their proposed change to anti-poverty programs. Trump signed a directive directing federal agencies to draw up recommendations on how to expand work requirements for low-income Americans. That would be on Medicaid. Uncle Ben Carlson tightening rent for the poorest households that receive federal subsidies, called next Section 8. In the House of Representatives, nearly passed in a farm bill that included additional work requirements for food subsistence or food stamps, which is used by 42 million Americans, but the provisions which require most adults to work part-time enroll in job training as a condition of receiving benefits, little chance of passing in the Senate. So these are some of the things that the Republicans have been up to, and the White House report, we'll just throw it up here, and it's a PDF expanding work requirements in non-cash welfare programs, they call it. This is from the Council of Economic Advisors. The summary here of the American work ethic, the motivation that drives Americans to work longer hours each week and more weeks each year than any of our economic peers, is a long-standing contribution to America's success. However, while Americans spend more time working than our peers in comparable economies, the share of working-age Americans participate in labor has fallen. We talk about this labor participation rate on Numbers Man. Last several years, Today, many non-disabled working age adults do not regularly work, particularly those living in low-income households. That kind of smacks a little bit of the Monahan benign neglect report. Such non-working adults may miss important precautionary and non-precautionary benefits for themselves and their households, and come to rely on welfare programs, a blanket thing here. This is just a summary. Let me just finish this up. In this report, we document the share of adult recipients in 3 major non-cash welfare programs who society generally expects to work. Non-disabled working age adults between 18 and 64. Shows this is you can't see this, but disabled working age adults make up the majority of participants in Medicaid, 61%, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, 63%, and Rental Assistance Program, 59% as of December 2013. Based upon the data from the Survey of Income and Program Participation, shows that the majority of these adult recipients work few, if any, hours each week while receiving benefits. 60% of Medicaid and 60% of SNAP and 52% of housing assistance non-disabled working age recipients work fewer than 20 hours per week. These low employment rates of non-disabled working age recipients suggest that legislative change is required to work and support that transition into the labor force. And some nice graphics there. We won't get into those right now. And let's see what else we have here. We have a Jesse story. The Senate can demand answers from Brent Kavanaugh. If he isn't honest, he shouldn't be confirmed. This is from Edwin Cheberinsky. He's a law professor, was part of the O.J. trial. In 2006, I testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee against the confirmation of Samuel Alito to the Supreme Court. At a break, then Senator Joe Biden came up to me and said it was all an exercise in theater. What he called a quobilic theater. He said everyone in the room knew that Alito was going to be a very conservative justice. He said Republicans pretending that he was open-minded and had no ideology while Democrats were trying to ask questions to trip Alito up. They didn't succeed in that. I think we are likely to see another exercise in quobilic theater with Brent Kavanaugh. Hearings on unless the senators exercise their power and insist that the judge answer questions on his views on various constitutional issues. A myth has developed that a nominee should be able to refuse to answer such inquiries. That was Neil Gorsuch, for example, refused to express his views on Brown versus Board of Education. There's no basis in the Constitution or law for the idea that a nominee to the Supreme Court should be given a free pass and explain their views. The idea that a nominee may refuse to answer a question rests on free premises. None of them have merit. One premise is that a justice's views on such issues as abortion, affirmative action, separation of church and state, and the death penalty have nothing to do with how he or she is likely to vote on the court. No one believes the Supreme Court justices have enormous discretion in interpreting the Constitution, and that they vote is much more a product of their values and ideology. As Biden predicted in 2006, Alito had voted with the conservatives in every case since joining the court, just as Sonia Sotomayor has predictably voted with the liberals. A second justification is that nominees don't have views on these issues. When David Asuda and Uncle Clarence Thomas went before the Judiciary Committee for their confirmation hearing, each denied having a position pro or con on Roe v. Wade. Patricia Ireland, then the president of the National Organization of Women, later quipped that there were only 2 adults in the U.S. without thoughts on abortion, and they were both on the Supreme Court. Suda and Thomas were simply not credible. Finally, there was a matter of bias. The argument holds that it's inappropriate for nominees to state their views because they will later be seen as a prejudice if the matter comes before the court. The flaw in this argument has always been stated. We often know the justice's views in general because the case is heard, whether it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Clarence Thomas would stand on a blanket overruling of Roe versus Wade, for example, is no secret. Yet no one suggests that our knowledge about the general views and their jurisprudence as revealed in numerous decisions make them impermissibly biased. Besides, pretending that a justice has no biases does not make it so. What a nominee cannot answer and should not be asked is exactly how he or she would vote in the future. That will depend on the particulars of each case and the briefs and arguments. But it is appropriate to ask Kavanaugh how he would have voted had it been on the court when Roe versus Wade was decided, or when Gutner versus Bollinger, which upheld University Affirmative Action programs, was decided, when the court handed down other major rulings. If Kavanaugh refuses to answer, if the answers are not credible, it is completely appropriate for the Senate to deny him confirmation. D.J. Trump has made it clear that he picked Kavanaugh for his conservative views. It's equally appropriate for the Senate to deny confirmation because of these views and because Kavanaugh refuses to answer questions. The framers of the Constitution intentionally did not vest in the President the sole ability to pick Supreme Court justices. The Senate must approve a nominee, and for the Senate to exercise its constitutional role, it must insist upon answers to the questions. It is time to end the Kobulik Theater. And this is by Edwin Chermaninsky. He is a dean, and Jesse H. Coppola, distinguished professor of law at, now he used to be in Los Angeles, now he's at UC Berkeley. This is in the Los Angeles time. Dance drama. Oh, okay, I got it. Kabuki. Sooner or later I would get it right. Anyway, we sometimes have to go round and round. Let me announce this. I don't want to forget this. This is a Woody Guthrie Folk Festival. It is happening now. It ran from 11th. It'll run to the 15th in Okemah, Oklahoma. And if you get down there, it will be going. And that is the birthplace of Woody Guthrie. Again, the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival, July 11th through 15th in Okemah, Oklahoma. It is worth going to, no doubt. Let's move on here. Where are we? Are we doing well? And move to our... Oh, we'll save Jesse for the next time around. And we'll do on the Monday morning quarterback. Anyway, to Papa John, NBA teams. This is from the Washington Post. Won the 12th of July. Suspend ties with Papa John after founder's admission of the N-word use. This is old Papa John, the right winger here. Shernata, I suppose is how you pronounce it, admitted he used the N-word continued this week as NBA teams have decided not to deal with him. He apologized and he resigned from the board. The Washington Nationals on Friday became the latest 6 teams to suspend their promotion deals with the chain, saying in a statement that they do not condone discrimination of any kind. Therefore, we've suspended our partnership with Papa John. The statement continues on the promotion deal, which extended in various forms for years. Customers receive 50% off old Papa John's orders the next day. The Yankees, the latest of 7 NBA teams, suspend their relationship in response to reprehensible comments by old Papa John. That's from the Yankees. The Miami Herald reported that the Marlins is also closing the Papa John's concession stand at their stadium. Their neighbors to the west, the Tampa Bay Rays, suspended a promotion in which fans could get the half-price pizza. That's according to the Tampa Bay Times. Our team have halted their promotion with the company, including other teams, the Kansas City Royals, the Seattle Mariners, and the Baltimore Suns. That's according to the Baltimore Orioles. I'm sorry, that's the Baltimore Suns here. We're taking a pause on the offer. That's from Kansas City. A host of Washington area teams other than the Nationals Orioles have promotional arrangements with Papa John to point to their sites. The Capitals, the Wizards, the football team, the Breeze, that's a soccer team. The Breeze joined a list of teams to suspend its relationship. Nothing about the so-called Washington football team. And let's see who else has gotten rid of him. Baseball teams were following the lead of Major League Baseball, which as its own entity has a promotion with Papa John's in which fans can get 40% discount on the day after. It moved quickly Wednesday to put the arrangement on indefinite hold. That's according to Yahoo Sports. Forbes reported that Schneider and other Papa John executives were on a call with a marketing agency hired by the company to help them return to the public eye. The entrepreneurs familiar to football friends and others from his central premise in the advertising campaign, blaming the company's disappointing sales last fall on protests by NFL players. And this is where the connection came in with the NFL players. Remember, on their knees. DJ Trump called them SOBs. Schneider reportedly claimed that Colonel Sanders called blacks the N-word, but didn't face the same backlash he had. Later, ostensibly to display his opposition to racism, Schneider talked about how African people had been dragged behind trucks to their death when he was growing up in Indiana. Well, that explains all. Indiana, incidentally, had the largest proportion of Ku Klux Klan members of any states, hundreds of thousands. They marched for Indianapolis. After comments were published, Schneider, resigned as chairman of the board of the company. He also stepped down as CEO of Papa John's in January following his NFL remarks. Resigned Wednesday from the Board of Trustees of the University of Louisville, to which he had been a major donor. The NAACP there called for him to get out. And the football stadium there at the University of Louisville has changed its name from the Papa John's Cardinal Stadium to the Cardinal Stadium. They are Louisville Cardinals. So this whole story on old Papa John. Papa John took swift action to deal with the issue. Said, oh boy. Other NBA teams and other ones, I was waiting to find this one, maintain their relationship. We Glenn at the national level, Papa John took action to deal with the issue, said the Diamondbacks, you'd expect that from the Diamondbacks, our partnership with local owner and operators in Phoenix. The promotion will continue. We have to understand who the D-backs are here. And, excuse me. The Houston Astros also signed the arrangement with local operators of Papa John's franchise. A lot of these are franchise. The team did not indicate it would sever their relationship because of disappropriate comment. Well, we do not condone discrimination in any context, and his remarks do not reflect the mission, vision, and values of our organization. The Astros said, this is from the Houston Chronicle. They have a 10-year partnership there. So now we know the teams that have been backsliding, let's just say that, to say the least. And let's look at soccer as we do the sports here. Later today, Belgium versus England. That's a consolation match at 10 a.m. Today, and tomorrow, the final, France versus Croatia at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. In America, that is on Fox, unfortunately. The baseball scores from last night, we don't want to forget those. The Rangers were in a Camden Yard. The Rangers, 5-4. The Brewers were in Pittsburgh. Pirates 7-3. The Blue Jays were in Boston, and 13-7 was the game there. Line score: Toronto 14 hits and 4 errors. You can believe that one. And the Sox 12 hits and no errors. The Yankees were in Cleveland. Cleveland 6-5. The Nationals were in New York. The Mets won that one 4-3. The Phillies were in Florida. Phillies shut out the Marlins 2-0. The D-backs were in Atlanta. I guess you could say they drove old Dixie down. 2-1 was the score. D-backs over Atlanta. The Royals were at the White Sox on the south side of Chicago. White Sox 9-6. The Rays were in the Twin Cities, and the score there was 11-8. Twins over the Rays of Tampa Bay. They had, 13 hits, and the Twins had 15 hits and 2 errors. Hell of a slugfest. The Tigers and Astros in Houston. Astros 3-0 there. The Reds and Cardinals in St. Louis. The Reds 9-1. The Reds have been playing a little better lately. The Mariners and Rockies. Rockies 10-7. The Rockies had 14 hits, 1 error. And the Mariners 12 hits and no errors. And in 10, the Cubbies were in San Diego. 5-4 was the final score. The line score there, Cubbies had 9 hits, no errors. And the Padres 10 hits and 3 errors. Don't win games usually like that one. And the Angels were in Dodger Stadium, Dodger 3-2 in that contest. And finally, the Athletics game we tuned into. And Giants in San Francisco with the fog. Giants 7-1. The winner was Mr. Bumgardner. Mr. Jackson, Edward Jackson, was loser, but pitched a very good game. They were scoreless, and then they were 1-1, then they were 2-1, and then things sort of imploded there. So that is sports, and the week that was on the 14th of July, 2018, from WBRN Radio and over the Boston Red Network. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the Monday morning quarterback. We will have Numbers Man. That's our economics program coming from the macro standpoint. That will come this week. And an open source report, finally, we'll get that out. And now we're to the middle of July.